A ceasefire deal to end the fighting between Israel and Hezbollah has come into effect. This after Beirut residents endured the most intense day of Israeli strikes since the war began. At least 42 people were killed by Israeli strikes across Lebanon on Tuesday. That's according to local authorities. This morning, cars loaded the main roads as thousands of displaced Lebanese started to return south. And some people were celebrating the end of hostilities, at least for the moment. Under the truce agreement, Israeli and Hezbollah troops are to gradually withdraw from southern Lebanon to be replaced by the Lebanese army, which says it is already taking the necessary measures to move in. Northern Israeli residents are also returning to their homes.
With his presidency now in its final weeks, US President Joe Biden made an announcement that many thought he'd never make.
Today I have some good news to report from the Middle East. I just spoke with the Prime Minister of Israel and Lebanon. I'm pleased to announce that their governments have accepted the United States proposal to end the devastating conflict between Israel and Hezbollah.
The agreement requires the withdrawal of Israeli troops from southern Lebanon and Hezbollah to end its armed presence in the border region. In their place, the Lebanese army will deploy at least 5,000 troops bolstered by UN peacekeeping forces. Israel's Prime Minister made it clear the agreement came with a warning.
The length of the ceasefire depends on what happens in Lebanon. In full cooperation with the United States, we retain complete military freedom of action. Should Hezbollah violate the agreement or attempt to rearm, we will strike.
Mere moments after the news of the impending ceasefire was made public, Beirut was rocked by airstrikes. Israel had stepped up strikes across Lebanon throughout the day. The Israeli army claims to have struck 20 sites across Beirut in 2 minutes. Rockets were also fired into northern Israel from Lebanon, with one hitting a bus station. There were also reports of drones launched at military sites in Tel Aviv. While celebrations at the news were underway in Lebanon, Prime Minister Netanyahu reminded Israelis that while hostilities in the north were over, the war in Gaza continues.
We are changing the face of the Middle East. With God's help, we will establish security, we will rehabilitate the north, and we will continue united until victory.
The Israeli government has repeatedly said that that victory is tied to the destruction of Hamas. And while the ceasefire is good news for Lebanon, the question of how to stop the destruction in Gaza still remains.
And we can go straight to the journalist Stella Mena, who joins us from Beirut. Stella, first of all, is the ceasefire holding so far?
4 hours after the beginning of the ceasefire, we have no reports about any violations. And as you can hear, you can only hear my voice. There are no sounds of bombardment, and even the sound of the drone that has been hovering over our heads for more than 2 months is gone. So this silence is really new to the people here. But yesterday evening and night, in the hours before the ceasefire agreement came into effect, Israel stepped up its game in bombarding Lebanon and the Lebanese capital, Beirut. It hit many places in central Beirut that have never been targeted before. So Lebanese people here also wake up to quite a big amount of destruction in Beirut. Despite this, people seem to be optimistic. We have seen pictures earlier of traffic that is building up on the streets towards the south, as some people have already decided to return home to their houses in the south. This is despite the Israeli army saying that people shouldn't go back yet. The Lebanese army also said the same thing. People shouldn't go back to the south yet, as the Israeli army is still deployed there. And the speaker of the Israeli army also said that it is not safe yet to return to the houses.
So people are going back to the south of the country. Hezbollah is supposed to withdraw from there, and the Lebanese army is supposed to enforce that, to demilitarize the south of Lebanon. What problems will the Lebanese army face there?
Exactly. The plan is that the Lebanese army will go into the region south of Litani River to take over there, regain control, and then only then the Israeli army will withdraw step by step. So, as we know, Israel has bombarded south of Lebanon heavily over the last couple of months. It has blown up entire villages, and the infrastructure there is completely destroyed, with many main roads also completely destroyed and really incapable of using. So infrastructure will be one challenge for the Lebanese army to actually reach and gain control over the area. Another big important issue is personnel. The Lebanese army needs to deploy a lot of new soldiers, needs to make the way through to the south. And this will not happen overnight. This takes some time. I have been to a press meeting with Joseph Borrell on Sunday evening. And in this meeting, Borrell said that he spoke to the Lebanese army about the needs and what they need to fulfill this task. And he said that soldiers are really a problem and that the Lebanese army needs to employ and recruit new soldiers.
Stella Miller, they're reporting from Beirut. Thank you very much. We go straight to Jerusalem, where we are joined by our correspondent, Tanya Kremer. Tanya, what's the latest there where you are?
Well, also here, there have been no violations yet reported to the ceasefire. It has been calm since 4 a.m. local time, and the ceasefire came into effect, and there have been no alerts for incoming rockets as well. That's what we've been seeing here in the past days. Also heavy rocket fire, especially on the northern parts of Israel, but also in central Israel. Now, what we have seen, and my colleague in Beirut talked about it, is the Israeli army issuing this note to residents in southern Lebanon not to return just yet, because the Israeli army so far will be still in southern Lebanon. This is part of the withdrawal that will happen over the next 2 months, and then in return also that Hezbollah will then move towards the north of the Litani River. And we heard Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu last night giving his arguments to the Israeli public while he decided to agree to this pause in fighting or temporary ceasefire for 60 days. He said that he would focus now on other issues, and mainly focus on Iran, give troops some time to refresh and regroup, but also to split the conflict with Hezbollah from the conflict in Gaza, where we see obviously the war continuing. And it's only after that that we saw the Security Cabinet voting with a majority of 10 to 1. A member of the far right was voting against this deal, but it went through. It's still a very fragile situation, though.
What does this deal now mean for the conflict in Gaza?
Well, I think there is some hope that, somehow this might be replicated in Gaza, but there's also at the same time no indication that this will just happen yet. We heard from US President Joe Biden, who announced formally last night this temporary ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah, that he hopes that this would also be replicated somehow in Gaza. There's also renewed pressure by the families of the hostages that say if this is possible in the north, then there should also be possible in Gaza. But there will be much more opposition, at least in the Israeli cabinet, to such an agreement. And we also don't know Hamas's stance for now. So for now, I think for people in Gaza, this means this war is continuing in full force.
DW's Tanya Kremer there, reporting from Jerusalem. Thank you, Tanya. And for more on this, let's bring in Mirav Zonshine. She's a senior analyst with the International Crisis Group and joins us now from Tel Aviv. Now, what do you think pushed Prime Minister Netanyahu to agree on this ceasefire deal?
Well, I mean, because he has become known in Israel as the man of endless war, I think people thought that maybe he's not interested in a ceasefire in Lebanon. But ultimately, the front in Lebanon is something that Israel, the military, limited its scope of the operation. It wanted to close that out. And Netanyahu has every interest in closing it out so that he can focus on other fronts, as he said. He made big promises about what he could deliver, both in Gaza and in Lebanon. But in Lebanon specifically, it was known from the very beginning that the deal would look very similar to the 2006 deal and that Hezbollah cannot be destroyed. And on the other hand, I think there have been, as far as Israel is concerned, very serious military achievements of degrading Hezbollah, of buying more and more time. And so for Netanyahu, I think this was a clear move that he wanted to make and that he was going to make. And there were also signals by the incoming Trump administration that he wanted that front done. So I think Netanyahu is also interested in giving Trump what he wants right now.
Now, what are the main obstacles for this agreement to hold and for it also to lead to a proper peace deal?
Well, at the end of the day, the ceasefire will only hold if both sides want it to hold. I don't think anyone has any illusions about what the U.S. is capable of implementing or the Lebanese army is capable of doing against Hezbollah. The question is what will be a violation and how that violation will be handled, and if the U.S. will indeed take on a bigger role this time. Netanyahu has promised freedom of action, freedom of operation, but I don't believe that he is actually going to be able to do that in the way that he is selling to his base. So I think the bottom line is that both sides at this point have an interest in laying low, in restoring the quiet on their fronts. The question is, in the bigger picture and in the longer term, what Iran is interested in doing, if it wants to build Hezbollah up again, how much Hezbollah wants to reinstate itself, and what Israel wants to do on the bigger multi-war front that it's in against Iran and all its proxies.
Talking about the multi-front war. Now, if this deal works, could it become a model for a similar agreement in Gaza?
Gaza is an entirely separate situation. Israel has set up, basically a military base and cut Gaza in half. It is using starvation as a weapon of war there. It has a far-right leadership in the government that's interested in resettling Gaza. And Netanyahu still has no interest in reaching a hostage deal. That's something that's been on the table for months. And he hasn't been interested in doing that, both for his own political survival and because of the base in Israel wanting to remain in Gaza. So that's a very separate story. When it comes to the ceasefire deal in Lebanon, I think that if the quiet it remains in the next 60 days, there could be, and it depends a lot on the Trump administration and how that is leveraged against other fronts. If they're interested in trying to push for the resolving border disputes and land disputes, if Lebanese politics tries to go in a direction that takes more authority over what's happening, that could be the recipe for not just quiet, but maybe also an actual arrangement for the long-term security of both sides.
Mirav Zonshine there, a senior analyst with the International Crisis Group in Tel Aviv. Thank you very much.
Thank you.